What's up? It's Canucks this week, and the conversation still remains the same, Randip. I guess, you know what? It has gotten worse for the Vancouver Canucks. The question I have is this rock bottom for Vancouver?
Okay, before I answer that question, I think a comment from JT Miller sums it up best.
When things aren't going well and for this stretch amount of time, it's hard. It's really, really hard mentally to stay the course and stay in, used our process to win games, and I always tell you guys it comes from moving your feet and competing, and for me at least, and I think when we get everybody to buy in, we're a really hard team to play against.
Is everyone buying in right now?
I don't.
That's where the Vancouver Canucks are right now. When you're questioning buy-in, Dan, you're pretty damn close to rock bottom. And the Vancouver Canucks, if you look at effort, if you look at how much they are literally buying in at this point in time to their team, to me, this is very close to rock bottom. Look at the points percentage that they have. In the Pacific Division, only Seattle is worse. We've got 20 points. 14 points in 20 games. That's terrible. And you look at the goal differential, they're even worse than Seattle in that Pacific Division. So when I look at the makeup of this team right now, on paper, it looks fine, but there's something up in that locker room when you go into every single game and you maybe play a half decent 20 minutes and then all of a sudden something happens in that game where you fall behind. Maybe it's one mistake, maybe it's a goal in the penalty kill, and everything falls apart. These guys are not looking fast right now. They're looking slow. Buy-in is a real question. And I'm starting to, if you weren't worrying about the Canucks before, you weren't watching hockey, but rock bottom, I think it actually could get worse because they are in a mood right now where they're not even, I don't even feel like they're interested in some games. And a 3 goal loss to Pittsburgh is a bad starting point, but it could get worse if they continue to play like this. So rock bottom, very close to it, if not there.
There's so many things, like with the teams that you mentioned. Seattle, you could point to poor goaltending. That's a reason for their slow start. Their shooting percentage hasn't really been there. They're starting to get a few more results. The New York Islanders, their slow start, nobody expected that. They spent the first 13 games of the season on the road, and now, they're going through a bit of a COVID outbreak within their roster. Arizona, you knew they were going to be absolutely terrible. So what is it with the Vancouver Canucks? And I have nothing else to look at other than the malaise of waiting for change with this team. It's crushing them, whatever that change is. And everybody's been put on notice, the GM, the coach, the players, with rumors flying all over the place right now. And it's funny because we're sitting here and it's been 7+ years of the Jim Benning era, Randy. The Vancouver Canucks are like a real life representation of Groundhog Day. We're all Bill Murray watching this team do the same thing over and over and over again and hope for different results. Like, where was this patience when the team traded for Brandon Sutter all those years ago or signed Louis Eriksson to a 6-year contract at a moment where it was clear to pretty much everybody they should have gone into a rebuild then? Or what about when they traded 2 first-round picks over the last 2 years? Where was the patience then? Here's the frustrating part. Some of these moves that they made, Louis Eriksson aside, Brandon Sutter didn't really work out, but he was a good leader for the team and was hopeful to still be on the team at a much more realistic contract than what he was being paid before. But you think about trading a first-round pick for JT Miller. He's arguably their best forward. A first-round pick this past summer for Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland, 2 of their best players this year. In isolation, those moves don't look absolutely terrible, but you're still in the basement of the league, even though these moves have actually been half decent if you look at them in a vacuum. There is no way this team is talented enough, or I should say there's no way this team is as bad as their 57-point pace reveals them to be. There is way more talent on this team than a 57-point pace over 82 games suggests. This is ridiculous. There's something going on with this team that they can't get over. The team's best player, Elias Pettersson, at least most talented player, went from being the alien because he would do all these things that would just make your jaw drop in the first 2 years of his career. Now he's Casper the Friendly Ghost. Like, I never see him in games. Travis Green barely played him last night against the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is an absolute disaster. And, you know, Elliot Friedman keeps saying they don't want to make a move that they'll regret for the next decade. They've been here for almost a decade, Randip. It's been 8 years, and they've continued to commit to these terrible results. Like, what else do you call them? It's been awful, and they haven't had change at the top of it, and they still are here. It's the malaise of change that has put this team into a state of paralysis.
No, they are in a state of paralysis. And the fact that Elliot mentions that they don't want to make a move that'll set him back a decade, that's actually a good thing, Canucks fans, because you can be, critical of the mistakes in the past, but the last thing you want is your GM, who by the looks of it is on his way out at some point, because if you continue on this pace, I don't think you can justify the coach being there. I don't think you can justify the GM being there. The last thing you want in that scenario is an outgoing GM making moves. You know what we call that? Peter Chiarelli time. And you don't want to be stuck in Peter Chiarelli time, where in Edmonton he made some just moving around players, committing to players that were absolute, failures in Edmonton. Brandon
Manning.
Mikko Koskinen's deal was signed during Peter Chiarelli time, where it looked like he was kind of trying to make moves, trying to do something, add some confidence to the organization. So be careful with that. So if they don't want to make a move that's going to set him back further, I actually applaud that, because for once you're actually thinking about the long term. Now, here's the issue with this team, and you kind of mentioned it. We can talk about all of those moves in the past and the peripheral moves and all of that, the secondary, or as Anthony Stewart calls it, the tertiary moves. But what I think about is your star players. If Elias Pettersson is on a 40-point pace this year, you're in trouble. You got no chance as a team to be relevant. But my bigger issue is what is going on with the player? What is going on with the locker room? You heard JT Miller. He's fired up. He's a player that is trying to figure out where the rest of his teammates are. I like that. I want to see more of that from the Vancouver Canucks. I want to see the other players come out and basically say, all right, this is enough. Either play for yourselves, play for pride, play selfishly because you're playing for that next contract. Show something. They haven't showed anything this year outside of maybe a game here, maybe a game there. Bo Horvat, their captain, who says all the right things, says it's unacceptable. He's on barely a 50-point pace himself. And this is a player who should be, for the Vancouver Canucks, if they are successful, be in the 60 to 65-point range, near a career high, especially when you load up and you give him wingers to play with. Connor Garland, Niels Höglander, Vasily Podkolzin are better wingers than he's had in the past. They have an assortment of them. So I'm here for, hey, when times are tough and you're saying you want to get to the playoffs, now this is a situation where the players have to look in the mirror. The coach has to look in the mirror, and the GM has to look in the mirror. And I'm going to also say the ownership group has to look in the mirror as well, because you're right. They are stuck in paralysis. The players feel like they're just waiting for a move. Travis Green seems like he's out of answers. Jim Benning, you hear from him last week, but since then you haven't heard from him because they're probably trying to figure out what's going on as well. This is a team that is on a road trip right now, which could get worse. And I know the teams are not exactly tough, but the Canucks need to look themselves in the mirror and realize they're a bad team right now. And when you're a bad team, you can get smacked around by anybody in the NHL. I don't care if they're the Ottawa Senators or the Columbus Blue Jackets. This team is in a bad, bad way.
It's gotten to a point where a player can come out after a game and it's another listless performance and they say, oh, this was unacceptable. I mean,
what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. It's great. That's the 17th time I've heard you say that in the last 12 months, Bo Horvat. And hey, it's not on him, but if it's unacceptable, show people that it's unacceptable. Right now, your words fall on deaf ears to everybody that is a Canucks fan. That's how bad this has been going back into last year. And you tried to write off last year that it was a strange season and the COVID outbreak really affected this team. Of course that did. The way their offseason went, of course it affected the way that they played. But they're still there. They're still the same team. They're, in fact, worse than they were after the start of last year, if you can even believe that. we always look at this, and in the NHL, you know how actually on Twitter, it's like there's the saying on Twitter, every day there's a main character on Twitter. You don't want to be that main character. Every year in the NHL, there is a team that becomes essentially the laughingstock of the league. It was the Buffalo Sabres. It's been the Ottawa Senators. Well, right now, the Vancouver Canucks are in the crosshairs, and they are that team. With their performances on the ice, how they've continued to commit to this group. Jim Benning is one of the longest tenured GMs in the league and has made the playoffs in an 82-game season once. It's insane that is the case, and that's the results that this group has committed to. And now, to take it to another level, you're hearing in the province that there's a rift between ownership within the Aquilini family. I mean, what's next? Every day, it's just like there's another shoe to drop of how this team can get worse. So yes, as we started the video, rock bottom, it could be here, but it could very well be still another step to go. So we talk about change, Randy. Final thought on this video. What would be the first thing to happen? Is it a trade? Is it a change of some kind? What do you think?
I'm not touching any trades right now because the players that the Canucks have, essentially, especially the good players, the high-end players, if you're trying to shake it up major, you're going to take a loss on any trade. You're not trading them at full value because the majority of these players, outside of JT Miller, I would say, are really showing something this year. So trades and major players, not doing it. If you're going to tinker, maybe in the bottom of the lineup, good luck. But what are you getting back? You're probably getting back a similar player. You're probably getting back terms. So I'm not touching a trade. This is all pointing towards a coaching change. And Travis Green, you could hear him in the post-game press conference with the Penguins after the Penguins game as well. Frustration, the state of the franchise, somebody asked him about, and he asked him, what's the state of the franchise? So still there's a bit of denial going on there. You can see some frustration, but the most important things when you're considering a coaching change is the team responding to you. And I watched this team for the last 2 weeks. Outside of maybe one game, they're not really responding to the coaching staff. They look like they're waiting for something to happen. So the first shoe to drop for me, it's going to be, I think, the coach. Because if you look at that team and the way they're responding, I don't see much. And I don't see a situation where, the GM is going anywhere in the short term. I don't see any major trades. What is that natural release valve when this, any team is playing so poorly? It's going to be the coach. And they do have an interim coach potentially waiting there in Brad Shaw, who has occupied that role before. He's a veteran coach that they signed in the offseason. So if I'm, looking in my crystal ball to see what that move is, I think it's a coaching move. Yeah,
it's hard to look elsewhere, and Travis Green he's been a good coach for this team. I think he coached up a few rosters in his early tenure to be better than their talent level was. But over the last couple of years, it's plateaued, and he's not getting enough out of this roster. And right now, the way that they're playing, they're clearly just not buying into whatever the message is. And I think it goes beyond Travis, but as it always goes, it's unfair on the coach when that sort of thing happens, but it's generally the only move GMs, ownerships have to make. What do you think is the next shoe to drop for the Vancouver Canucks? Is this rock bottom for this team in this era? Let us know in the comments. We respond to as many as we can. And if you enjoyed this video, you can listen to us on Sportsnet 650 every day, Monday through Friday with The People's Show, and also on podcast. We're now on Spotify, so check us out there. Subscribe, and we'll be talking to you in the next video.